Good everyone. I hope you're having an amazing day. So today is the final wrap up of Platform Dev certification course. So today we're going to look at debug logs, and we're going to talk about deployment process, right? So until now, you would have seen me doing a lot of stuff on Dev Console, and I'm pretty sure you will be fairly confident with how to use the Dev Console, right? So we're going to look at a few things around Dev Console, if you're using Dev Console, right, and how to set up a debug log and kind of stuff. I've already covered that in my initial lectures when I started with Platform Dev, but nevertheless, I will talk about it today as well. Okay, so as usual, so you need to log into your developer account. But one thing I wanted to tell you that I won't be able to demo you the deployment process because I'm using a free org. So there is a deployment way using chain set, and I can't show that because you can't see chain sets on developer org. So you need to use the sandbox because I got no sandbox. So I will talk about it, and it will be good for you to know what all the deployment stuff. I don't use chain set, so we'll talk about it when we come to that stage. Okay. All right. So first thing first, what we're going to do, we're going to log into your developer console. So the way to go to developer console by going to this gecko icon, and it takes you to developer console. Excuse me. And I'm pretty sure you're fairly confident with the options out there on the screen. And so this is where you can see all your logs, and this is your test, and this is your checkpoint. This is a query editor where you write your SQL queries, right? This is view state, this is a progress, and this is problems, right? And so sometimes what happens is that when you work on when you keep on doing a lot of work on developer console, you might get a message that your log limit has exceeded, yada amount of megabyte MB or something. So you need to clear your log. So the way you can do that, so you can do using Apex query. So you can go and clear your logs, right? So the way to do that, you go to query editor, right, and you type select ID from Apex log, and you see this using tool API. If we tick that, and see right now we got no logs, so you won't see anything. So when you get a lot of logs here, you select each one and then delete row. It will clear the logs, right? That's one way you can do that. Because what happens otherwise, you can't generate a log if you get that message, right? Okay, so developer console is for someone who codes on using developer console. You can use Visual Studio if you want, Studio Code, or you can use Einstein. Sorry, not Einstein, because I've been working with Einstein, so that's why. So Einstein came up. So you can use Eclipse as well, right? So it's up to you which developer environment you want to use. I use mostly Dev Console. Sometimes I use on my home computer. I use Visual Studio Code. Because I do other stuff as well. Using Visual Studio Code, I write React code as well at times. Okay, sorry, I digress. Okay, so this is the interface you're going to get, right? So file, if you wanted to create any new Apex code or Apex trigger, you can go file, new, and it will actually create a class, trigger, Visual Force page, Visual Force component, and all of the stuff here, right? And if you wanted to open a resource, you can go here and you can open any resource. And if you wanted to look for a class name, you can, let's say if you have a demo, so you can look for a class name here. You can filter it, and you can look for the triggers, you can look for the page and packages, etc. Right? That's cool. And then we have, if you wanted to look for a content inside a file, let's say, I might have written something at google.com. Sorry, not Google. Account. So these are the files which contains the word account. So this is the one option you can look at as well, right? Very handy option. I like this option a lot. Then you can debug it. So debug is very good because if you wanted to run a code using anonymous window, you can do something like that, right? And this is for batch I've written. So you can run this way, right? You can copy a code here and you can execute it. And if you open the log, you can see the log here. Let me give you a very simple example. Let's say system.debug, right? Test, and if you run execute here, right, it will create a log for you. And then to see your message, all you have to do is go to debug here, and there you go. You can see the debug here, right? And when you go to logs tab, you can see the logs here. So all the logs which has been generated, you can see, go through and see here. And if you double click, it will open up the log for you, right? And so yeah, that's one of the very handy option. And then you can also execute last, which will execute your last code from here. And so everything, so you can read through the log file. A lot of things you might find as a noise, you know. So if you are after debug information, you can go to debug, or you can filter here what you want to look for it, right? So you can find it here as well. You can also download this log. If you go to file, download log, you can download the log file as well. If you wanted to, if you're comfortable reading in a Notepad++ or other tools, you can use that as well. It's very handy. Then you have something called Perspective Manager. So if you wanted to, this is something I wanted to show you guys. So this one actually gives you information of the stack trace, execution tree, you know, and the code and the code which get executed. Very handy. If you're interested, you can check it out. I sometimes use, and you see it tells you which part of code is executed, right? And yeah, so this is very handy. Okay, so and then you can save your perspective as well. Okay. And then one important thing you can also do, you can change the log levels. So let's say this is my current log level, and if I wanted to change the debug level, you can go add, and you can, if there are a lot of them, you can you know, change it, or you can add it. It's useful at times if you wanted to, let's say if you wanted to refine your log selection right here, you can pick and choose the logs levels which you have set up in your setup debug mode. I'll show you how to do that in a minute. So this is one of the very fancy option, sorry, not fancy, this is one of the coolest option what you have, where you can play around with the logs and see what's going on, right? And these are the variables which shows here. It's very handy for troubleshooting. Right, so then we have a test which actually lets you run the test. You can run a test, or you can rerun all tests, right? If you remember in my previous Apex test session, I talked about, you know, how to create a test class and how to run a test, right? So that's one of the stuff you can use it here, and you can, so what we can do, we can close this one. You can go here and see your test result, right? It shows pass or fail or whatever. That's very handy. And you can run all the suite. You can create a new suite, and you can, you know, add, you know, you can, if you have different tests, you can, you know, if you wanted to run all the tests together, you know, you can run that as well using the suite, right? And so if you go to test, new suite run, so yeah, it will run this new suite, right? And then we will, let's see. Okay, so that's fine for now. Don't worry about it. So you can run the test, what I'm trying to say, using the suite. It's like a package, right? If you can add 10, 15 test classes and run it together. Right, so that's about test. And the workspace. Workspace is very good. Like, let's say 2-3 developer working on the same developer console. You can create your workspace, you know. You can create a new workspace. You can say demo workspace, right? And then it will create a new workspace. And if you log in, say for whatever reason it takes you to this workspace, then you can go to workspace and switch workspace and go back to your demo workspace. There you go, right? Or you can go back to your default workspace, whichever was your workspace, right? We'll be back to our actual workspace. So this is very handy. I would suggest you to play around with it. I mean, a lot of stuff you can do, right? and then we have preferences and as I mentioned about it. So this is and then yeah. So this is not really a tools handover, a tool session. They don't usually ask about the developer console as such, but you need to know, how the login works, which is very important, right? The thing with the logs is you need to take special consideration when you're dealing with integration or background processes, right? The one of the thing I would suggest you or advise you that you put as much log as you can, especially or if you think that it can go wrong, right? Especially in their catch section, right? And it's very important to log the details which you think is important, right? So if you think it's not important, that's up to you. I mean, up to your business process, whatever, or up to your customer, whatever they want to see, right? So I mean, we do a lot of logging. So you need to, because logging is very handy if you wanted to troubleshoot, right? But the thing is that if a client want a fancy logging report or other thing, then you need to work out how to do that, because you can create a custom object and put all your log data there, and then you can create a Salesforce report from out of it, and do whatever you want with that. So that's one of the things you can do if you wanted to do a report-based logging, right? Yeah, so and one more thing I wanted to talk about, the way you can activate the log, right? Sometimes what happens is you need to be very careful with the logging. First of all, if you activate your log for, let's say, for a whole year, then what happens is that it logs every time you do something, right? The logs will get created, and when the logs will get created, it requires a lot of space, right? And which unwanted space. So maybe have a scheduled task or something which actually deletes the log every 3 days or every week or whatever your business process is. So okay, so what we're gonna do, we jump back into setup here, right? And I'm gonna show something about debug. Debug logs here. Right, so if you so what we're gonna do, so this is what we have. If you don't have a user, you can just go and create a new, and then you can set the trace entity, or and you can set up a log here, or you can create a new debug level here, and you can choose whatever you want to do, right? And then that's pretty basic. So right now my logs are deactivated because its start date is 6th of May, and and expiration 7th of May. So what we're gonna do, let me edit it, and then gonna activate it for today's. So what I'm gonna do, I will make it today's day, and then okay, and then I'll make this at today's, and I'm just gonna add it to, say, 12, because what I often do if I okay, so there's something wrong. Oh, sorry. Okay, so what we're gonna do, we can't put that. Okay, so what? All right, must be in the future, right? Oh, sorry, because it's AM. Yeah, sometimes get confused with that stuff. Oh man, what's wrong? Not null. Must be after the start date. Right, okay, so what we're gonna do, this is weird. Alright, sorry. Yeah, pay attention to this one. This can get you in circles at times, so yeah. So what I've done, I've activated the log for 2 hours. This is what I often do when I wanted to troubleshoot. I activate this for 2 hours to see if client comes to me and say, look, this is not working. So I activate the log and run it from a developer console. Let's say what we're gonna do, execute anonymous window, and let's say we're gonna run execute test, right? Okay. And then let's see if we got any log generator here, right? So we're gonna click here. Logs are interesting. So you need to understand logs very well. So see, we got a log here, and you can download it, or you can watch the log here, or or you can view it here if you wanted to view. So that's your choice. So yeah, I mean, you can actually see the information here. So the logs are very handy, and it's very useful to know what's going on, right? And so especially for if you're doing an API integration or a web service integration with a third-party system, right? Logs often helps. It gives you more information about what's going on with your code, if it's something's failing or it's not working, right? Right. So that's all I wanted to talk about logs. So I hope this is clear for you when it comes to log, right? Logging is very important, very essential. It's one of the core things you need to know as a developer, because I would encourage you to write logs in your code, or whatever. If you have a customer handling, it's better to record your stuff, right? That's happening behind the scene, because what if something goes wrong, right? No code is perfect out there. I mean, you might think that everything's perfect, but what if there is an exception on the data side, right? Your data might be invalid, or for whatever reason, things can go wrong, right? So maybe the integration on the other side, third party, was sending something else, right? And you were expecting some of the data, so everything started to break. So you need to know where things are falling apart. So in that case, logs are very important. Cool. Right. So that's for the logs. Now I want to talk about deployment process, right? So unfortunately, I can't show you a demonstration on deployment because I don't have the deployment product, two different orgs. So we're going to talk about basic stuff about deployment. So after you deploy your stuff, right? Usually, what happens in a client environment, or if you're working for a customer or somebody, you normally develop a customization or anything, right, on the sandbox. So once you once you develop a stuff on the sandbox, usually the client will test it. Once you say, oh, look, it's good for testing, so client will test it and they're happy with it. And when the deployment, based on the deployment planning, what you have with the client, you need to deploy the stuff to your production. So how to deploy it? There are three different ways, right? One is using a chain set. In fact, four different ways. One is using a chain set, right? Chain set is out of box. So you go to your sandbox, right? And go to chain set. And then you add the components you want to deploy, and then you deploy it, and then go to production. You go to your inbound sets, right? So you have a concept of outbound and inbound. So you put your components in inbound sets, right? And outbound sets means which you wanted to send out. And inbound is where the production will receive it, and then you validate it and deploy it. It's pretty straightforward. And you need to connect two orgs. That's the first thing you need to do. So usually but the problem with it, we don't use chain set because what we have found that it's very slow at times, and we really didn't, for whatever reason, our team doesn't use it. So we use a third party that's called GearSet. GearSet is you need to buy. It's not free. You need to buy their license to use it, but it's very reliable. I'm not advertising anything for GearSet because this is not a sponsored video for any GearSet. So, but I'm telling based on my experience, I have deployed stuff using GearSet, and GearSet is good. It's very good. I mean, I really enjoy working with GearSet. So check it out. Go to the GearSet website and see, and there are some videos out there as well. So have a look around, play around with it. So GearSet is pretty good. And another thing you can do, you can create a package, right? So you can create a package and then, give a link and then install it. So package could be two types, unmanaged and managed, right? So it's up to you to figure out whichever way you want to use. So mostly the managed package, you can't see the source code, right? That's when you wanted to sell your stuff. And unmanaged package, you can see the stuff, you can see the source code and kind of stuff. Other thing, you can use the force.com IDE. So usually you can go to Eclipse and right click and say deploy to server, and it will ask you for the server credentials. So you enter that, it will validate it and deploy. So the thing you need to keep into consideration before you deploy Apex code, you need to have a test class, right? And should have a code coverage of at least 75%. So I often recommend to target 80%, because what happens is that if you're relying on production data, right, for whatever reason, you might think, oh yeah, it's showing 75% on sandbox. It may not be the case with production. It might show, say, 20%, 30%, because the data may not be there, right? Depending upon the scenario, right? So I would always suggest that if you can make it to 80 to 90%, that's pretty, that's a solid percentage where you can be sure that it will be deployed, provided you have the valid data, right? And if you are relying on production data. If not, then if you're someone creating everything on your sandbox, right? If you're creating every test data, then that's fine. Then 80% probably mean 80% in production, because every data you are creating, right? But there might be case that there might be validation in place in production, which or may not be in place or whatever. Right? You need to keep into consideration. You need to think about it, how you do your deployment. You can't do deployment, just without thinking. It is a planned process. You need to understand your deployment process very well, right? What the components or metadata you need to deploy to your production. You need to sit with your deployment team, or if you are the one who's doing deployment, you need to work out the components you need to deploy. If you have to deploy non-Apex code, non-Apex components, so you need to work out that, right? So what we normally do, we deploy the Apex to the last. We deploy the rest of the stuff, right? Custom objects, custom settings, and all kind of stuff. We deploy first, then we deploy the Apex to the last. Because if you deploy everything together, then it's a nightmare. I can tell you that. It's a pain, right? So that's one of the things I just wanted to share with you. It's just based on my experience. So I've done deployment. So yeah, so right. So I hope that you find this session valuable, and that's pretty much I wanted to cover. I think we have pretty much covered most of the stuff with Platform Dev. If you think I missed something, please do let me know. I will cover that as well. And Platform Dev is not really difficult certification. You need to practice. You need to understand the programming concept, right? And so if you're someone who's planning to take Platform Dev, right, please make sure you have at least a year of programming experience, right? Please do not attempt Platform Dev, because you've learned stuff, like for a month or two. That's really not good enough, because when you get certified, when you go and work somewhere, people have an expectation that you can do stuff, right? Otherwise, certification will lose its meaning, right? If you can't do stuff, right? That's my opinion. I mean, you can have your own, right? Free world. So what I'm trying to say is, I'm not trying to discourage you, anyone out there. What I'm saying, if you should be fairly comfortable with, with stuff like Apex triggers, Apex development. You need to know what batch classes are, how to create a queue, what are future methods, how to do at least write a basic API, integration. Those things you should be fairly confident, And then you need to know what are custom objects, how to create a custom objects, right? How can you write a test class? Are you comfortable with the Visual Force page, at least the basic part of the Visual Force page? Do you know the difference between Visual Force and Aura component? And why do we use Lightning component, right? And that kind of stuff you should be fairly confident, right? Can you create a leads? Can you create a contact? Can you create an account, right? So, and can you create a workflow? Can you create an approval process? Can you create a process builder? Can you create a flow builder, right? When to use flow, when not to use flow, right? When to use code, when not to use code. These are the things you need to know, right? You can't just say, oh yeah, I'm going to use code for everything. No, that's not going to work. If you're someone who said, I wanted to create a custom object using code, oh man, I'm sorry, that's not going to work out. That's not what the coding is about, right? There are a lot of things you can do without code. You can develop stuff on Salesforce without writing a single line of code. Code comes in the picture when there are certain things which you can't do using point and click, and you need to know what platform events are. Are you comfortable with event-driven architecture? You need to know how to do a subscriber, publisher model kind of stuff, right? You need to know all those kind of stuff. So go through your Platform Dev exam guide, right? And go through all the contents that's required, and practice. You need to practice a lot on Trailhead. You need to, you're fairly confident. Create a business scenario, a dummy business scenario. It doesn't matter. And and start practicing. That's how you learn it. Maybe, find a study partner, who can help you with, learning and keep you motivated, right? or write blogs about it, right? I write blogs, so you can write blogs about it as well, right? That's the best way to learn, right? Learn and educate the rest of the world. This is a fantastic way. Salesforce is a great platform. I mean, a lot of things they're doing, a lot of stuff they wanted to, they're coming up. Now they've done, I think they have done some changes on the dev side of things as well. That's a different topic altogether. But what I'm trying to say, practice well, right? And prepare concept, right? Understand the fundamentals, right? And then if you think you're fairly confident, and try practice tests, right? I would encourage you to check out Focus on Force. That's pretty good. I've used that a couple of times. It's pretty good. They provide you with a lot of questions around different certifications, right? Since we're talking about platform dev, so platform dev one, I think there is a Focus on Force certification test on Focus on Force. Check it out, and please prepare and please see if you're, where you're standing. If you need more help on some topics, go through it and improve that area, right, before you attempt platform dev. So yeah, that's all I wanted to cover. So good luck with your exams, and please do reach out to me. Please put a comment below and just let me know if you need to know anything, right? Cool. That's all for today. Adios and greetings from New Zealand. Bye bye.